week over the controversial procurement of Christmas trees by the Ghana Airport Company. An invoice in circulation from the airport company suggests some 128,000 Ghana cedis were spent on Christmas decorations. The invoice bears the name of the board chairman of the Ghana Airport Company, Paul Adomotri, who has been explaining the issue and his involvement in the procurement process on a show he hosts on TV.
So what happened was that because of the COVID situation, this process about creating Christmas inspirations at an international airport is the same for every airport in the world. Every year it's done. Every year in Ghana it's been done. Even before Terminal 3, when there was only Terminal 2, inspirations are created at Christmas. So the principle is there. As soon as this principle arrived for the purpose of this period, we were interested as the leadership to be sure that prudent spending was done. Let's begin with the point about the invoice. So this is by a company called Favors and Art. I think that by now we all understand that an invoice is not a bill. An invoice is an intention of a company to do something for us. So I can send an invoice to Metro TV, say I can build you a studio for 10,000 cedis. If you see that invoice leaked in the newspapers, it doesn't mean that Metro TV have bought the studio from me. The name was on the invoice because I requested that I needed to see the invoices that the potential suppliers are sending to the company so that we can intervene by bringing down the cost. Because if we don't see the invoice, all we know is that the company will pay the money, we will not be able to intervene. So let me have a look at the invoice was the question that we asked, so that we can intervene in reducing the price. So were we able to do that? First of all, let's make the point that this invoice was not accepted. Why do we say so? Because this invoice is the one that has a Christmas tree, 4 of it for 84,000, and so people are banding around that a Christmas tree was bought for 84,000. That's untrue. We put out a statement that the Christmas tree was bought for 34,000. In fact, used. The reason why the invoice was on was so that we can make an intervention. Okay, so now let's go and see what intervention we made. What intervention did we want to make? We wanted to make an intervention so that there will be prudent use of the company's resources. And we are confident that the company's resources was better and prudently used because of the intervention from the leadership level.
He also explains the intervention they made in the process to ensure what he describes as prudent use of resources. But there's also the politics of it. He goes back to 5 years ago and draws a comparison in the figures spent on the same set of Christmas decor.
Okay, so in 2016, the spending on Christmas inspirations was 126,000, and this was at one terminal. This was at just one terminal in 2016, and 2016 is significant because we understand that some of the people who are raising concerns about it are animated by politics, and they are animated, therefore, by the political positions they take. And that is why we go to 2016, which was a different political arrangement. We all know that. December 2016, the NDC had lost the election, but the NDC authority was still running the airport, and this is what happened. 5 years ago, please remember that it's 5 years ago when they spent 126,000. You can calculate, those of you who are good at financial engineering, you can calculate the rate of inflation and then see if we were spending even the same rate, how much it would have been today. But in actual figures, actual terms, this was 126,000 spent in 2016. And they spent it on one terminal because at that time, the airport had one main terminal, Terminal 2. We are not saying that they did anything wrong in 2016. We believe that the principle that every international airport does Christmas inspirations at the festive season is a correct principle. Okay, so this is now 2021. 128,366 is the total amount of money that was spent on 2 terminals. Terminal 2 and Terminal 3, because now in 2021, Terminal 3 has arrived. 2021, Terminal 2 and Terminal 3 spent 128,366. We have not finished the story. So when this came up, this is the critical part of the intervention. We decided that the company, and I have to take you back to 2016, where we write here that this money was totally paid by the company. This 126 was paid out of the company's coffers. So when we arrived at this position, because the leadership was involved, we decided that, well, let us see whether we can get some sponsorship for this. Let's see whether we can get some sponsorship for this. So guess what? We called Ghanaian companies, Ghanaian advertising companies, and one of them, DPP, came up and said that, yes, we'll help you to pay for some of your Christmas inspirations. That has not happened in a very long time, but that happened this time. We called in the advertisers and spoke to them and said that, well, you need to help us. So they said they'll pay us some money. We asked for some money, we discussed, and they came to a certain amount of money, and they told their management that amount of money was 50,000 cedis. So the 2021 spending had a sponsorship package, cash. It's not 50,000 in equipment, in cash. The DPP decided to support us because of the representation we made to them, that they will support us with 50,000 cedis for the purpose of creating the inspirations at Christmas. So what then is the total cost? The total cost is then 128,366 minus 50,000, and that brings us to 78,366. That is the amount of money that was spent in 2021 compared to 2016, 5 years ago. This is 2 terminals. That was 1 terminal.
Well, the minority in Parliament has described the justification as untenable. We'll hear from the ranking member on the Transport Committee shortly. But the co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption, Edem Sinanu, earlier raised questions about the role of the board chairman in the said procurement.
Well, the issue be what is the interest of the board chair in the procurement of lights, etc., for the company, because the board as a strategic organ doesn't get into operational issues. It would appear that the board, or specifically the board chair, is interfering with the normal operational running of the entity. And it will also appear that there is some interest, because this is very unusual. The way I understand it, if Poladomoche is the board chair, there's absolutely no reason why any invoice should be written in his name. I assume that Ghana Airport Company Limited must have an MD or chief executive. That will, at an operational level, he would be the person. Otherwise, the procurement unit more, in fact, even that would be the more appropriate unit that should be addressed in this. So it raises questions why the board chair, as I understand his position is, would be receiving an invoice. So that's a red flag. So it may not necessarily be a clear case of any form of corruption at the moment, but there is an extent of potential conflict of interest. There's also, to some extent, interfering with the operational work of the entity, and those are issues that are worth raising and flagging and asking why on earth the board chair will be the one whose name is put on these kind of invoices.
Well, co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption, Edem Sinanu, is joining us for more on this. Good evening to you. Now, you heard the explanation offered by the board chairman, Edem Sinanu. Does it suffice?
It does not explain any of the key issues. It does not address why he, as board chair, has been involved in this process, why his name was on the bill or invoice. It does not explain why we had only 2 companies, which is not best practice. Usually it's 3 companies that would bid minimum. And usually you're supposed to have much more. Then you shortlist and select, so the criteria is clear. It doesn't explain these key issues, and why the board chair should be so, I don't know what word to use, intent on making sure he makes a defense which focuses on cost rather than process and policy, just beats my imagination. I think it's deserving of much more attention. The procurement unit of the Ghana Airport Company Limited ought to provide documentation on the process for us to understand how we arrived where we are today.
All right, but he goes on to argue that financial prudence was achieved in the end, and then it cost them a lot less than it should have, or it has cost them in the past.
I mean, that only depends on what the scope of work was. If over the last 3-4 years, first of all, it is commendable when you make any cost saving. But to be able to ascertain that truly we have made cost saving, one would need to compare what was the scope of what was targeted in 2018, 2019, 2020, compared with what we're doing in 2022. Is it the same amount of Christmas trees that were supplied at higher cost and now is at lower cost? Or was it far less? So the fact that there's been a reduction cannot be interpreted immediately to mean that things have been done much better than they were in the past. one needs to look at what was the scope of work in terms of the products or the goods that were being purchased previously as compared with now to draw that conclusion. So we still need the paperwork to be able to have an informed understanding of what he's saying.
All right, there's a push for parliamentary probe. Is that something you would support?
Oh, yes. To the extent that the board chair has not been so minded so far to just instruct his procurement unit to put out the information properly, highlighting the process they followed to engage these service providers, why we have only 2 instead of 3, why one of them appears not to be registered properly. It obviously means that somebody else has to accompany an independent body to investigate what has transpired. So I think it's a worthy call.
All right, thank you very much, Edem Senanu. Edem Senanu is co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption.